A quick note about transsexualism, because I argue with people about this on the web far too often, which probably isn't the best hobby, but a lot of the time I hear people invoke the dolphin argument, or the tortoise argument, or elephant argument, whichever animal you want to name it after, where they say, well, you know, if someone who's male-bodied thinks they're a woman, or vice versa, what's to stop me thinking I'm a tortoise or a dolphin? I imagine this argument stemmed from a certain episode of South Park, and as someone else pointed out, ironically enough, you really shouldn't outsource your thinking, especially to a cartoon. But basically, this is how it works. Now, the way sexual dimorphism works, it's always a woman giving birth, never a man, but the woman can give birth to either a girl or a boy, or someone in between, someone who's intersexed and kind of a mismatch between the two, or has chromosomes which aren't XY or XX, but something else, such as XXX or XXY or XO. In addition to that, it's possible to give birth to someone who has the physical characteristics of one sex and the brain of another sex. This is because when the fetus is in the womb, there's one particular time range, a time span of I think a few weeks or so, when the genitalia are being created, and then a few months later their brain is kind of set which sex it is. And the physical sex of the baby is determined by the androgen levels in the womb, and due to genetic factors and possibly other ones as well, the fetus may or may not be able to take advantage of that androgen and make use of it. And depending on whether that's the case at one time, their physical sex will be one or the other, or in between. And at the other time, later on, a few months later, when their brains, I'm not sure if it's actually the brains being made, or whether it's just certain properties of the brain are being established, but at that time, depending on how much androgen is present at the time in the womb, and depending on whether the fetus is genetically able to make use of it or not, that will determine the brain's sex. And that's how it's possible to have one physical sex and another mental brain sex. Which is what happens with, transsexuals. They have one body and another brain, and both of them are fine and perfectly healthy, but they don't match. It's trans as in cross, and sexual as in not sexuality but the sexual characteristics, and it's saying that there's the brain and body have their sex crossed. One's male, one's female, so you either have a woman with a male body or a man with a female body, and either way it's not good. Which is why transsexuals change sex as much as they can in order to get their body to match up with their brain as it already is. And that's how that works. Now, the reason you can't be a different animal is due to the way evolution works. You can give birth to a girl or a boy or someone in between, but you cannot give birth to a member of a different species. That is not possible due to the definition of what a species is. What separates one species from another is, after a while of evolving, if you've got one group of the species evolving on one island and another group evolving on a different island, eventually they get to the point where they cannot have sex with each other and have children, which in turn can have sex and have children. Once that happens, by definition, they're a different species, and you cannot give birth to a different species. You can only give birth to your own species. Sharks and dolphins and tortoises and turtles, they all have vastly different shapes of brain. You couldn't really cram them and fit them into a human, skull. It wouldn't work, they wouldn't fit, they're quite different shapes. A human being can never give birth to anything other than another human being, although they can be a slightly different, slightly evolved human being, one generation at a time, and eventually we're going to become various different species. But on the short term, you're only going to give birth to someone the same species as you. You cannot give birth to someone a different species, and you can't give birth to someone who has some characteristics of a different species and some of your own. There's no kind of interspecies mishmash people, whereas there are intersex people and there are transsexuals. Both do exist. We know about them. They're quite well, fairly well understood at this point. So yeah, if you kind of are saying, well, you're a woman with a male body, what's to say I'm not a dolphin with a human body? That's the reason. You're either misunderstanding how sexual dimorphism works, or you're misunderstanding how evolution works. Either way, I hope that's cleared things up a bit. Okay.